Hello, everyone. I'm Orla Farrell of Easy Treesy, our project with Crown Planting a Million Trees with Ireland's school children and their communities. So our tagline is Stop Talking, Start Planting, part of the global initiative to plant a trillion trees. So given that it's Biodiversity Week, at this time in May, you may recognize this beautiful white flower. You can make a lovely cordial out of it. Uh, and if you can spot this tree where you live at this time of year, you can go back in the winter and chop a stick as long as your arm and get planting for at no cost. Elder is one of those quite small trees, and if you have space for something uh, like a willow, here are three willow sticks that my grandchildren planted some weeks ago during our National Tree Week. They're growing very nicely, and you can do the same with that. We call that project Plant an Elder Wand or Plant a Whomping Willow. It works with poplar as well. Now, I'm really looking forward to hearing Christy's talk. Very topical with Nomo May at present. And anyone who has questions, if you would like to email them in, we will respond to them because Christy's talk is about 40 minutes long. So we will get back to you. So thank you all, our attendees, our supporters, and of course, our sponsors. So over now to Brendan Fitzsimons of the Tree Council to introduce Christy.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. There are few people better placed to tell how urban parks function as vital biodiversity corridors than Dr. Christy Boylan, founding member and first president of the Tree Council of Ireland, and someone who has helped shape the living fabric of our cities, from the great expanses of the Phoenix Park to the smallest pocket parks. Christy was a landscape architect with Dublin Corporation Parks Department and head of the Parks and Landscape Services Department in South Dublin County Council. He is a lecturer at Technological University Dublin, an adjudicator for the National Tidy Towns competition, and chair of the international jury for the Entente Florale Europe. He has written numerous publications and presented papers at national and international conferences, and is a fellow and former president of the Irish Landscape Institute. Christy was the inaugural winner of the World Urban Parks Distinguished Individual Award. Christy is the author of The Parks and Gardens of Dublin. This beautiful book offers the history and development of over 150 parks and gardens in Dublin. He will discuss the importance of parks and gardens, which are rich in biodiversity, in artistic heritage, as well as plant collections from all over the world. We are running this week's biodiversity talk in collaboration with Easy Treesy, Cron, whose project founder, Orla Farrell, has partnered with us in distributing 830,000 native trees mainly since Science Week 2019, with the goal of planting 1 million trees with Ireland's million school children and their communities. The trees are planted where possible in public parks and community areas, a project which started in 2015, planting a tree for every school in Ireland in Dublin's Seagrange Park, Fingal. Orla, I'll hand over to you at this stage.
It's a privilege through Easy Treesy and in partnership with the Tree Council of Ireland to be here with Dr. Christy Boylan, whose life's work has shaped how we understand and value our public green spaces. Working with children planting trees across Ireland, I see daily how people respond to nature when given the chance. Today's theme, Parks as Biodiversity Corridors, speaks to connection continuity and care. Christy, we're honoured to have you with us. And you might like to start by telling us a bit about your beautiful new book.
On the screen is a cover picture of my book, The Parks and Gardens of Dublin, which was launched in September 2024. This was a hardback version, and it's almost 600 pages. And it's of the parks and gardens throughout all of Dublin, including the Office of Public Works and the various county councils. Now, that hardback version is no longer available, so the softback version was launched in August 2025. And it includes a note that this book won the Irish Landscape Institute Design Award in 2024. And it's available in good booksellers. You won't get it in small little shops. But bear in mind, any shop that sells books can buy this for you. They can order it in. But if you want to buy it directly from the publishers, Wordwell will send it to you post-free if you contact them at this link that's on the screen, the Parks and Gardens of Dublin, Wordwell magazine. There's a little bit on that picture from the web link about the book and a little bit about myself. So I'm delighted to have this book available, and it links in very well with all the talk of planting trees and all the experiences I've had over the years working with the parks. And we now move on to the third presentation, the first slide of which is multiple forest benefits, change in vision for the future. These are all the benefits of forests. So you can see climate change is one that's in there very much now. Biodiversity is what we're really focusing on this week, but there are also economy benefits, and this applies particularly to parks, by the way. People may not think that there's an economic use for parks, but there is, because if they weren't there, there'd be a lot more need for hospitals and prisons, where people wouldn't have places to relax. So recreation and health is very important for people, not just walking, but sitting and relaxing. Flood control is where the work as well, and when we get bad weather, we know about that. Renewable energy can be use of water or use of wind, and then various other things. So that's some of the multiple benefits available. So how did they do this? Well, they do this by creating connected, naturalized networks that allow wildlife to move, breed, and forage between fragmented habitats, effectively counteracting urban development impacts. You see, where there's a house, there isn't going to be any wildlife of any significance. But they connect fragmented biodiversity zones, such as parks, canals, and coastline, to form vital ecological networks that support plant pollinator and mammal migration. So you can see in this illustration there that there's core areas where you have a high intensity of wildlife, and they're connected by corridors where it's not as intense, but they're valuable connections. So looking at these, a picture of Ireland, you can see straight away we have a lot of connections. In this whole landscape, agricultural landscape, you see some forests here, but look at all the hedgerows. Now, some people think that hedgerows have come down to us from the Celtic era, but no, they haven't. They came down to us from the 17th century. And indeed, they were the result of grants from the British government to try and enclose lands for agricultural purposes. They weren't intended to be areas for biodiversity or areas for growing trees. They were essentially areas for preventing animals from going from one pasture land to another. And that's why we have this wonderful landscape we have today. So the value of wildlife in urban areas is often underestimated. But the urban areas can act as a corridor, and well-managed urban areas, which parks are, can act as stepping stones in wildlife migration. And you can see pictures on the left-hand side illustrating that, and you can see the need for it in the picture on the bottom of some of these urban areas, that it's difficult. So green channels going through these are important for wildlife to migrate. By providing landscape connections between larger areas of habitat, corridors enable migration, colonization, and interbreeding of plants and animals. So they can, what can a corridor be? It can be a sequence of stepping stones, not stones as such, but it can be green areas across the landscape. Discontinuous areas of habitat such as paddock trees, and then wetlands and roadside vegetation. It can be a continuous lineal strips of vegetation, which our hedgerows are, and habitats such as riparian strips, ridge lines, etc. Or there may be parts of a larger habitat area selected for its known or likely importance to local fauna. A corridor is a natural or artificial connection between two pieces of fragmented habitat. That's been already stated. The idea behind a corridor is that the strip of natural habitat is allowed to remain. It should link two fragments of habitat that are being conserved. And this is meant to allow for local extinctions and recolonization. In practice, it is not so simple, but you can see it in the illustrations on the right-hand side, the value of these areas. Corridors play an extremely important role in the maintenance of biodiversity, but they can only partly compensate for the overall habitat loss produced by the fragmentation of the natural landscape. When we have more urban areas, we're going to have more fragmentation. It's just going to happen because we need housing very much more, and we need industry, and we need schools, and we need offices, and so on. It is therefore important that vegetation remnants and vegetated corridors are maintained and enhanced as a network across all lands, both public and private. Now let's look at some of the core functions of Irish urban parks as corridors. Parks link isolated habitats such as rivers, canals and private gardens, creating a green and blue network. This is legally supported under Article 10 of the Habitats Directive, which requires stepping stones to maintain the conservation status of designated areas. Now, in my book, I deal with various themes of parks and why they exist. And one of them is rivers and canals, where parks are made along rivers and canals, which are vital corridors for wildlife. Corridors are critical for the maintenance of ecological processes, including allowing for the movement of animals and the continuation of viable populations. So you can see here in these little illustration here, two areas on the left-hand side are not connected. But if you have something in between, well, it will help. But it's better again if they are connected in series, we'll say. Now, pollinator support is the next way that this core functions of Irish parks works. And under the All-Ireland Pollinator Plan, councils are transforming parks into foraging networks by reducing mowing. This is known as wilding, and planting native species. Parks provide the regular food sources and nesting sites that bees and hoverflies need to survive in cities. So you can see in this little illustration or this picture of a lovely little park, which is actually in Cork, Ballincollig, where they have wildflowers growing. Included there are poppies and various others. And not only is it given beautiful colour, but it's helping pollination. And while we cannot preserve every bit of land, we can provide areas for wildlife to expand to new territory without having to interact with humans. Environmental corridors provide a natural segue between two large pieces of natural land which can be used by wildlife to travel. Now, the third function is riparian and linear walks, which I've already alluded to. Many Irish parks are situated along watercourses. For example, in Dublin, we have the River Dodder and the River Corrib is in Galway. These riparian corridors are essential for aquatic and terrestrial species like otters, kingfishers and migratory fish to travel between the city and the wider hinterland. You can see in the picture on the right that the land is continuous, but the road is going underneath. It's a tunnel. It's called a land bridge. And you see this quite common in some countries. I've seen quite a few of them in America, but they need more of them there. This is a great example of one here. A wildlife crossing can be an overpass as the Wuste Hove in the Netherlands, and you can see the underpass in Hungary at the Tisa floodplain. It allows the road to be built, and instead of building it up with soil or something, you allow the water wetland to exist. The fourth idea here is a refuge for specialist species, where, for example, in the Phoenix Park and large regional parks, they serve as a nuclei which are core areas for sensitive species, while smaller pocket parks provide critical landing spots in dense industrial or residential zones. Now, some wildlife, such as foxes, are wonderful for managing within urban areas, and when we're all asleep in our beds at night, they're jumping over and back into private gardens, particularly the front gardens where the walls are smaller, and they're finding food there. So, but this is the Phoenix Park. It's 1,700 acres of park, and we're lucky to have this. It's over 300 years old, and it will always be there because it's protected by legislation, and it's a national treasure, national landscape. Now, corridors can be as big as a large river or whole miles of forests, or as small as a culvert under a highway. Any small area that retains its natural qualities helps wildlife extend to their natural range. Corridors also keep wildlife out of human living space, where they are usually met with hostility for invading our land. So this all happens. Now, 10-metre to 30-metre wide corridors are sufficient for species moderately or highly adapted to human activity. The maximum length of 2,000 metres with a minimum width of 20 metres can suffice for neighbourhoods. For rural areas, a width of 50 metres is advised for shorter lengths. So linear parks play a great role in this, provided it has a minimum width for wildlife. Urban areas and biodiversity. Wherever trees are established, wildlife and other plants are sure to follow. Trees and associated plants provide shelter and food for a variety of birds and small animals. The parks, gardens, street and front and back yards provide a very diverse range of plant species that generate a myriad of habitats and niches for wildlife. Now, we're coming to trees. It's where we started with the Tree Council of Ireland. And why trees? Well, there are many, many reasons for having trees. Most people see trees for their visual value. And while many people appreciate that, there are quite a number of people who do not appreciate the visual value and in fact regard them as a nuisance. But when we look at the overall benefits of trees, we can see that they create safer walking environments. They absorb water from the air, and they absorb water in the roots, so they absorb stormwater runoff. They reduce traffic noise, not significantly, I have to say, better than a mound or a wall, but they do. It's a psychological difference mainly. They improve air quality because they're producing oxygen into the atmosphere and absorbing carbon dioxide. They capture pollutants, and in many cases, the studies were done to show that these consists of dust, and dust to capture the pollutants and hold on to it, and it makes the air cleaner. To provide a natural habitat for all forms of wildlife, and of course to reduce energy bills if they're in summer weather when they're shading some places from the heat of the sun. That's not such a problem in Ireland, but it certainly is in warmer countries. They screen homes if you want them to be screened, or they can screen undesirable views from your homes. And trees help raise property values. Now, that's some of the benefits of trees. Now, how can trees cool down our cities? So it's going forward with the benefits. Trees provide shade, which directly reduce temperatures by blocking sunlight from heating surfaces such as roads, sidewalks, and buildings. And trees cool the air through a process called evapotranspiration, where water is absorbed by the roots and released as water vapor through leaves. The cleaner air, trees can improve air quality by removing pollutants, as mentioned already, and of course to soak up the rain. So you can see they have a great impact on the environment. Now, what are the values? This is looking at some of the economic values, the social values, and the environmental values. Now, we focused more on the environmental values a few moments ago when we talked about wildlife and stormwater and temperatures and absorbing carbon. But they also increase the economic value of a house, and they reduce energy and water bills, and they absorb stormwater to reduce flooding. Already mentioned, I know. But for social purposes, they reduce driver speeds if they can be planted in such a way that they'll prevent people from speeding up. Improve safety, and they can encourage people to walk. People will walk near trees rather than walk in an open air. They improve health and well-being of residents, and of course, they improve the aesthetics of a neighbourhood. Most neighbourhoods that are doing well are neighbourhoods where there are plenty of trees. Urban forestry is a term that was brought in back in the 1990s to show that forests, we're familiar with forests out in the hills, but trees within the city and urban areas are also a forest of a kind. They're providing some of the functions. And they're not just forests within the parks, they're trees and private gardens as well. They're doing the same functions that we've mentioned earlier, that cools the air and regulating water flow, and the filtering urban pollutants, and the carbon dioxide mitigation, and they improve physical and mental health, and they reduce needs for air conditioning. They call them shade trees in America, for example, because there's less air conditioning needed around them. And if you're in one of these countries, which I have been in several times, go under a tree and it's amazing how you can bear that hot environment with the difference in temperature under the tree. So there's some other ideas, the wildlife, and there can be money in the tree as well. So there's some of the values of that. Property values. Research has shown that the presence of trees can increase the value of residential and commercial properties by between 5 to 18%. Village and retail areas, the presence of trees in retail areas positively affects. Now, I'm one of the judges for Tidy Towns, and we love to see trees in towns and villages because they create such a wonderful atmosphere. They enhance the approach and make every place look much nicer. So there's an effect on heating and cooling in buildings. Trees provide shade, shelter in wind, and a regulation of local air temperature. Now, that can convert into money. So you can see somebody put together this little benefit in money terms. So there can be, in America, they worked it out, of it, one tree can be a total of $122 benefit by adding up the various benefits there. Now, health and well-being. Physical benefits. Trees have a positive effect on health through the provision of shade, outdoor recreation, amenity, and clean air. Mental benefits. You know, there's also a thing called social prescribing, where if somebody goes to the doctor and they explain what their illness is, and the doctor says, well, there's nothing I can give you as a prescription for medication, but I can prescribe that you go and have more walks in the parks and gardens, and even taking up some gardening. And that's the mental benefits. So many people will claim that they reduce stress very much by working in gardens, particularly with trees. So this is an emotional well-being as well. Trees with seasonal displays give you that impact of seasonal change. And we're right at the beginning of all the flowering trees at the moment, followed by peach, plum, pear, and apple. That's the sequence of flowering that happens. And then we have the cherries, particularly in May. Landscape screening, not everybody in cities is aesthetically pleasing, not everything, and in some instances, trees and other vegetation can be of assistance in screening undesirable views. It helps improve recovery from illnesses, as I already mentioned, reducing stress. The focal point and can improve social cohesion. It's nice if you're in an office when you can look out at trees, or especially in hospital. And this is why landscapes in these areas are so important, and why it's nice to have parks near hospitals and schools where they can come and visit without having to travel much of a distance. Now, this moves into an area called green infrastructure. This is a relatively new term. It's been out for some decades now, and it means that we're well familiar with grey infrastructure, which are roads and housing and railways and so on, but they don't look well unless there's green infrastructure with them. And you can have even areas converted to green infrastructure so that the impact of the grey infrastructure isn't too bad. So, for example, urban agriculture, you can have people growing crops in community gardens. You can have green walls with wall plants and other forms of greening. You can have green roofs as well, and some places, and it's very popular in some other countries such as Germany. Street trees bring greening into the streetscape as well, and you can see that there too. Urban woodlands help even great further. So those are some of the elements of green infrastructure. And green infrastructure also deals with waterway management and so on. So that's another element of this. Nature and biodiversity in your locality is being promoted by the National Biodiversity Data Centre. And they're saying that the funny thing is 100 crops provide 90% of the world's food, and 71 of these are pollinated by bees. Now, we can eat many other crops, and when I go to other countries, I often have flowers in my dessert, which are all edible. We never think of eating flowers here. Wildflower meadows provide food for wildlife, to provide colour for us, and so on. Now, the idea of growing wildflowers is a good idea, but it's not so easy to do. So then the promotion of don't mow, let it grow is what's happening. So if you don't mow as much, you'll be surprised at what seeds come out of the ground, for example, orchids. So it's a great way of easing off the mowing of grass, which can be a tedium and can be difficult and costly. And people do like parts of areas being mowed, but some areas will look better if they're not mowed, unless you mow a little margin around the edge to let everybody know that you know what you're doing. And this is what you often find in parks, that the verge is managed and the other part of the area is let grow. And there are different types of meadows. For example, if you look at the top of the picture, you can have a long flowering meadow providing food and shelter for pollination. And in the short flowering meadow you also provide food for pollinators. And there's some of the plants that you can grow, like self-heal, bird's foot trefoil, clover, and dead nettles and dandelion. Dandelion is one of the most important, and it's wonderful to be driving on the motorways, if you get a chance outside of the protests, to see the medians are all dandelions. Where there are medians, sometimes there are no medians on the big motorways, but the dandelions are just yellow, yellow, yellow. And then in other areas to have a lot of daffodils. Now, daffodils do not produce much for pollination, but they do add colour, and that's great to have. You can have a 6-week meadow, a flower-rich one, if you first cut after the 15th of April, which is not far away. That allows dandelions to flower. Dandelions are a vital food source for pollinators in spring. The second cut at the end of May, the cutting at the end of May and not again until mid-late July, will increase the growth of important plants like clover, self-heal, cuckoo flower and bird's foot trefoil. The third cut in mid to late May maximizes growth of clover and other wildflowers, and the fourth cut is in August. A tightly mown lawn is like a desert for pollinators. The land on the right of the wall is simply a result of reduced mowing. Yellow rattle is a wildflower, that's not only nice, but it also is a little bit of a parasite for grass. It competes with grass and it prevents grass from growing. And after a few years, you have lots of yellow rattle and other wildflowers that grow as well. So that's a good one to plant if any of you are thinking of increasing biodiversity. Now, some other tree council events that happened since we started in the beginning, we had a plantathon in Corker Park in 2000, and you can see the work in the top left where the holes were being dug, and people were invited in for this. We had Duncan Stewart as a celebrity involved in television programs, and we had Charlie O'Connor, who was the mayor of South Dublin, on board. And some kids liked the picture taken during the planting. And you can see in the bottom picture some of the woods that were planted on that day. So it's very nice to see these things successful. In Terryglass, there is this planting called the 7 Trees for 7 Signatures. And Terryglass was a winner of the national competition, an overall winner for 2 terms. And every overall winner was given with a project by the Tree Council, 7 trees for the 7 signatories on the proclamation of 1916. And these trees were planted in 2016. And Terryglass, I've seen several of these plantings in my work as a Tree Council adjudicator, and the way they've done it in Terryglass I like very much. The trees are on the left-hand side, and in the long term they don't see the trees on the right-hand side as being viable. So these are a replacement line of trees, and they have a lovely stone explaining what the whole thing is about. A gift from the National Tidy Towns to Terryglass, winner of Ireland's Tidy Town in 83 and 97. Imagine winning it twice. To symbolise the 7 signatories to the 1916 proclamation. So this was a project done in association with the Tree Council of Ireland, and I was proud to be the person who initiated this and worked with both the Department of Rural Community Development and the Tidy Towns in making it happen. And it's lovely to go out and see it in our trips around the towns and villages. Another project was the IKEA tree planting, which was done with Fingal County, Tree County Council and Fingal. And you can see the Aine and Ilauna there beside Kevin Halpenny, who's the Senior Park Superintendent in Fingal, with some other people from the Tree Council and from Fingal. And that was a great success. And that's in Santry Woods. And it's moved on then to other areas. To date, there are 11,000 trees on the Tree Register of Ireland, which I mentioned earlier on, which are recorded using global positioning systems technology to accurately determine a tree's location. So, for example, you can see Douglas Fir in Powerscourt Gardens, which at that time was the highest tree in Ireland at 57.5 metres. And you can view this at the National Botanic Gardens database. And this was all work done by Aubrey Venel, and you'll find some of this in the book that we mentioned earlier. So this is a valuable resource. Now, the Tree Council for National Tree Week had a lot of information up on their website, so you can see there's good information on biosecurity of our trees, forest bathing, and you don't need your bathing suit for that, but it's a good enjoyable activity. Carbon footprint, Celtic tree astrology, Easy Treesy is there. Orla is heading that whole arrangement, and National Biodiversity Week, which you're in now, and so on. So these are valuable areas for information, and down below that you can see available publications that you can buy directly from the Tree Council. The last slide I have here is of the National Tree Week launch in Newbridge Estate, which our President, Catherine Connolly, so gratefully did for us, gracefully as well, on the 8th of March. And it was a nice opportunity for the current executive, led there by Cormac Downey on the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the picture, to be present, and have the picture taken. And on the bottom picture is of the past presidents with myself on the right hand side. One missing is Fergus Malloy, who didn't let them make it out on that day, and well done. He's 92. He's a wonderful age at this stage. But it was nice that so many others were able to come and be present for that occasion. Mention them.
Thank you, Christy. Oh, that was most interesting. I especially loved your 6-week meadow plan, which I'm going to pass on. Now, I was wondering, in our case, what advice would you give to those engaging the next generation?
You mean community activity?
Exactly.
Like you're doing?
And yes, the planting of trees.
Oh, well, planting of trees. The important thing in planting trees is that they're done correctly. And the greatest danger of community planting is that they're not done correctly. And there was some studies done years ago that 50% of trees planted by community groups fail on the point that the site was not properly prepared, or the trees were not, maybe some weren't even alive when they were planted because they were let dehydrate. So it's important that the tree from the beginning, from its being dug up in the nursery and brought to the planting site, does not be allowed for the roots to dry out. If you 5% of the roots drying out, that tree will fail. It's such a small threshold. So you must keep the roots moist. And, you know, a tree, and it should be in a plastic bag. Sometimes you see people, in the past anyway, you see them with trees on the roof and going along with the roots exposed, and it's not going to live. It's already dried out before it's planted. So that's the first important thing, is to make sure that the trees do not dehydrate and they're planted as quickly as possible, and then that they're planted after the planting, that they're watered. And watering is critically important for 2 years, because if you plant at the right time, it will start producing roots in May with the water that's there, and the roots that's produced then will help find water in the rest of the summer. So the spring watering is the most important, and if it's a very dry summer, follow up. But water for 2 years, and then of course, if it's staked, as you see in that picture, that stake has to be checked over 2 years. It should not need a stake after 2 years. If you put a stake low and the tie low, well, then that tree will get away from the stake much quicker, because the top will move and the roots will firm. Once the roots are held strongly by the stake, they'll get stronger. So those are some of the things, particularly advice for community groups. Orla.
Thank you, Christy. That's excellent advice. And you referred earlier as well to weeds taking over some trees that had been planted there in a bypass. So that is something we recommend. Brendan has demonstrated stamping on those weeds and covering up with mulch. So that will all contribute to the hydration, I think.
That's true. And grass is one of the worst competitors with trees. They will take all the moisture, and the roots of the trees are not established enough to compete with them. So grass is the worst weed of all. And some people think if you leave grass around the tree and just mow it, that's okay. But no, grass that's mown is even more vigorous again, and it will take all the moisture. So you must have nothing within a meter of the tree if you can help it at all. Or dying vegetation would be better.
I asked the right person. I have a second question. If you if you'd like to consider, what practical steps can communities take to contribute to these biodiversity corridors?
Well, some of these I've already mentioned, by not having the grasses growing and not mowing as much. But if you have a group of trees together, they will all grow better than if you have isolated trees. Now, isolated trees for an avenue are great. You need that. But if you put 2 or 3 trees together and don't allow vegetation to grow between them, either by mechanical means or mulching or something like that, they will all grow very well together. there is a hybrid effect of trees growing in a group.
Thank you, Christy. And you've shown us every tree, whether it's in a schoolyard or a city park, can be something larger, part of something larger and living. So we are very grateful for your contribution to our Biodiversity Week education series. And I'll hand over to Brendan now to say the last word.
Yeah, Christy, just to
Thank you.
see that it is the 40th anniversary of the Tree Council. In relation specifically to urban trees,
Yes.
in areas, have you seen much change in those 40 years in terms of things getting better or worse?
It depends on where you are, Brendan. In Dublin City and in the counties around Dublin, you have established Parks Department with some with 3 officers and the rest with Parks and Landscape officers who are skilled in the knowledge of trees and trained skilled gardeners who take care of trees. Number one, in their planting programs, which are quite extensive, they have the right species and they have the right aftercare. But unfortunately, when you leave Dublin, even go into Meath, there are no officers in the local authority who are skilled in the management of parks or open spaces. They have those, but they're not trained people, and that's the problem. And this is a problem around the country. In many cases, the wrong species or the tree isn't maintained afterwards. It doesn't, either it's not watered, or the stakes are not removed, or it's not pruned when it needs formative pruning, particularly for street trees. So all of that is a lack of skills within the country.
So we certainly have a lot more to do in terms of getting all the councils across the country up to speed on, the technical requirements and the expertise and everything else.
That's true.
As a foundation for doing the urban greenery. Okay, Christy, well, thanks a million for that. It's fascinating talk. As I say, you bring back a lot of memories from the entire history of the Tree Council, and it's great that you're still here, involved and interested. So again, on behalf of everybody at the Tree Council, thanks a million, Christy.
Well, thank you, Brendan, and thank you, Orla, and thank you, Siobhan, for facilitating the whole process. And I hope everybody has a good week, and we look forward to more activities in the Tree Council in the years to come. Thank you very much.